Thank you, Tricia, for that wonderful reflection on this idea of God. That is kind of where I want to go, but what I understand, I have a couple of things I have to handle first, little laundry list here. First of all, I have a feeling the lovely lady that brought these live Alstroemeria flowers may have done that because she saw my shoes last night. Dr. James Mellon was here, and one of the things he said was that how important it is to get your bloated nothingness out of the way. So I'm going to do that right now. I do actually have nice shoes. They're in my hotel room in Irvine, and I wasn't willing to do 3 hours of driving to go get them. So, and the really top end of the thing is that these Skechers are really comfortable. So that's what you get today. I understand that it has become a custom in this community for the speaker to begin with a joke. So here's what I got for you. A church had just recently hired a new minister. A fellow was much younger than the previous minister who had retired, and as the new minister was there over the first few months, the grassy areas around the church had ceased to be tended. And so the chair of the board came to the new minister and said, you know, our last minister mowed the grass around here. And the young minister said, yeah, I asked him. He doesn't want to do that anymore. And that's how things change. So I do want to have a conversation about this idea of the divine. And it really is an idea more than anything. We're all speculating. And human beings, since the beginning of the human experience on this planet, have sought to understand the methods and madness of the universe. And what they do is they create a deity or deities. And that's pretty standard in the world. So the fact that there are many of them shouldn't be a surprise, because not until very recently have we as human beings, as a species, been able to communicate around the globe instantly. Most of the time that human beings have been on this planet, they've been in small areas of groups that worked on creating their understanding of life together. That's why we have so many different disciplines. And this thing called God has so many different forms. One of my favorite philosophers, Benedictus Spinoza, from the 17th century, said that if a triangle could describe God, it will describe God as a triangle. So no surprise that most of the descriptions of deity come with a physical form. They look pretty human. And I want to demonstrate that to you. I've got pictures. So we're going to look at some of the ways that the divine shows up. Let's get out of the way here and see what happens when I push the correct button. Let's see how I did. There it is. So we're going to do this tour of deities and get a sense of what's out there, because the question today is, how big is your God? So we start with this idea of polytheism, poly meaning many, and theism meaning gods. So in this particular case, what you're looking at is a way of seeing God as many different gods. And the biggest example in the world comes from Hinduism. That's been around a really long time. And they have this, whoops, I went the wrong way. I knew I was going to do that. I got that out of the way now. Here we go. Here's a representation of Hindu God. The one in the middle there is known as Brahma, the creator. I'm assuming the one on the left is Vishnu, the preserver, and the one on the right is Shiva, the destroyer. Now, in human form, these three gods had wives, and they looked something like that according to the artists that drew pictures of them. And this would be that Saravatsi is the wife of Brahma, Lakshmi is the wife of Vishnu, and Sati and Parvati are the wives of Shiva. Now, isn't it interesting that the god that is the destroyer in the Hindu faith got two wives? Not sure quite how that works, but that's the way it got set up. So that's your basic look at the hierarchy of godheads and there are many, many more. In fact, let me give you one more. Hindu goddess Kali, the liberator of souls. Apparently, she liberates souls by cutting their people's heads off. Whatever it takes. Comes from a different time. So don't mess with Kali. There are other religions that are polytheistic. And here are some examples. In the upper left is Greek mythology. The beautiful face in the lower left represents Roman theology, which just kind of renamed all the gods. And when that existed, and the one in the middle, the picture in the middle is Nordic. And when these things existed, they weren't called mythology. They were called religion. That's what people believed. That's how it was organized. So that there were all these gods. They all looked like humans, but they were superhumans. And they gave Marvel Comics a great opportunity to create superheroes out of some of that. So, that's wonderful. What you've got on the left here are the Asian forms of polytheism. You've got Shintoism on the bottom there. Comes from Japan. And then you have Taoism, which comes from China. So you've got all these different ways of looking at God as a multiplicity of personalities and such. And that's okay if it works for you, but is that as big as your God can get? Huh. So let's move on. See what else there is in the world that has to do with this. Monotheism. The fellow on the screen there is a representation of a monotheistic God, meaning God. Kind of a wise-looking fellow, but not all that friendly-looking. And in the early days of the Hebrew faith, God wasn't friendly. That where understanding is that he would smite you in a moment if you really pissed him off. What a way to live your life. And plenty of people still today live in that kind of a consciousness. I mean, look at that dude. There's nothing pleasant about that. I mean, got a nice big crown on, but look at those eyes. I guess people think about that judgment thing and make that a big part of their understanding of God. You can't get close to a God like that. And even though that God might be a destroyer, how helpful is that in having a God that works for you in your life? See what else we got under this monotheism of a very famous painting, Michelangelo's from the Sistine Chapel. That was in my house for a long time. I gave it away because I don't have the sense that that's really representing the God that I believe in. Yeah. Anybody know what that is? In Islam, they don't have pictures of God. They have a symbol, and that's their symbol. So, okay, you got a symbol. But when you read about this, let me read you. I actually did a little research on this. Let me read you the one that speaks of Islam. And I Googled this stuff, so it came right off the web. I didn't write this. This is what Google says about Islam. In Islamic theology, God is the all-powerful and all-knowing creator, sustainer, ordainer, and judge of everything in existence. Islam emphasizes that God is strictly singular, inherently one, merciful, and omnipotent, meaning all-powerful. Well, if God is all-powerful, then what are we? In Islam, you're not all-powerful because God is, and there's that separation, which is the basis of monotheism, is that you have a relationship with a deity outside of yourself. But it's not just Islam. It's the Hebrew God, and it's the Christian God, although the Christians got clever here. Handsome fellow, huh? Kind of Aryan looking. Chances are, whoever this one Yeshua was, he probably didn't look like that. Yet most of the world would see that and go, well, that's Jesus. Because it is our tendency to create God in physical form. So in the Christian faith, the connection is more with this God-man, Jesus, than it was with this creative force of the universe. And Jesus was smart. He took people away from the earlier pictures you saw with the red eyes and all, from thinking that was God into something that could be recognized and related to. So great progress in the Christian church, but not as far as you can go, because if this is your God, that's still pretty small. It's still dwelling in the world of the physical. Non-theistic religions. Now, isn't that a clever idea? That's religion with no God. And these are real things. I know because my teacher, my first spiritual teacher, the one that kind of began my awakening, was he had two disciplines from his past: Zen Buddhism, which is that obviously, which is represented there by the Buddha, and the symbol of the center one. Does anyone know what that symbol is? Scientology. Scientology does not believe in a deity, much like the Buddhists. So he was a Zen Buddhist and Scientologist. Don't be afraid. The Scientologists have some interesting thoughts on how life works. I do not subscribe to their way, but the cool thing is that when I worked with Ken, my teacher in Sydney, Australia, and someone would say to him, "So what do you think of God?" He was this great teacher, and he would tell you about using energy and creating in your life, and he was just this brilliant teacher. And they would ask him, "Well, what about God?" He said, "I have no idea. Let's talk about something else." And it didn't matter, and it's not that that's a terribly bad thing. I was there and learned a lot from him. But I came back yearning for something more. Oh, let's get the last one off the page here. Anybody know what that last one is? It's atheism. Atheism is the religion that tells God they don't believe in God. That's just what they do. It's kind of interesting. I can't figure out how this universe was not involved in some level of intelligent creation. Otherwise, how do the intricacies of human form, of physical form, exist without all these laws of nature and physics and all this? That just happened? Come on. Something is making all of this happen. So the non-theistic stuff has its limitation, and obviously nothing for you to base an understanding of the divine on. Then I found science of mind. Ooh. Yeah. That was a new way for me. That was a new understanding that really helped me move beyond this idea of something outside of me. And although as soon as I heard it, I knew it was true, but I hadn't thought of it before. I grew up in the Baptist church, and the outside God, the one that could, send you to hell, all that was in my life. And then I rejected it all, much like Tricia talked about. And then I found that there was another way to see it and be with it that was not only better for me, but bigger, as big as I could make it. Universal idea of God, pantheism, the idea that the universe and God are the same thing. That's a nebula from space that was named the Eye of God. It's beautiful. It's a nebula. It's not really an eye. But see how we do that? See how even at the level of science and astronomy, we continue to put these ideas of God being in physical form into our minds, which limits our understanding of God. And besides, you don't want to piss off that nebula. Because sometimes it looks like that. So what can we do? Well, I've got a model here for you that I think might help you think this one through. That's theism. Doesn't matter, monotheism, polytheism, however it is. If you have an idea that there's a God out there that has some control over your life, you're theistic. And you can see God and the universe are two separate things, right? Then you've got this thing called pantheism that I mentioned. Pantheism is the idea that God and the universe are exactly the same thing, that the intelligence of the universe dwells in the universe. And although that is true, Holmes was very clear that this creative force of the universe is not absorbed by its creation. You've heard that phrase. Not being absorbed by your creation means that you exist and you're bigger. You're bigger than the thing you're creating. So we have a third way to look at this, and this is who we are. You may or may not know this word. It's called panentheism. We are panentheists, which means that we believe that God is bigger than the universe. Now, not necessarily physically. You got to do this to create any kind of a graph to explain it, but the idea is that God exists in greater form and greater presence than the physical universe. And there are some teachers that gave some great examples of how this works. One was Wallace Wattles. Anybody heard of Wallace Wattles? The Science of Being Great, The Science of Getting Rich. are books that he wrote before Ernest Holmes. In fact, Holmes gives him credit for some of that in his life, reading Wallace Wattles' words. Let me give you a quote from Wallace Wattles. There is a thinking stuff from which all things are made, and which in its original state permeates, penetrates, and fills the inner spaces of the universe. Meaning that whatever the universe is filled with this presence, this thinking stuff, was the way he said it. There's something that's everywhere and always. And if it's everywhere and always, it must exist at the point of me. And it must exist at the point of you. And the more we can become aware of that, the bigger our God gets. Yes, we always relate to the divine from the point of us. We don't go looking for God out there, but God's out there as much as right here. But why trek out into the world to find God when God is right here? God is in the midst of all of my thoughts and my actions and my words. Every part of my life is based on that divine presence. When I know that, it looks different. It changes the formula. We don't have to ask for permission, except from ourselves, to let go of these limiting thoughts, to quit arguing for our limitations, and to step into this divine essence that we are, and to live from that place. What a concept. What a different way of finding God. So I would suggest to you that this idea of being pantheistic, this idea of seeing God as greater than physical form, is who we are and how we would have the biggest possible God. And again, we're not even talking about time and space. We're talking about what is the vision that you hold for the divine presence in your life. Is it who you are? Holmes' words were very clear on this. In our Declaration of Principles, it begins, we believe in God, the living Spirit Almighty, one indestructible, absolute, and self-existent cause. This one manifests itself in and through all creation, but is not absorbed by its creation. That's where we start, right there. And then a little bit further down, he says the highest God and the innermost God are one God. Now, there's another step here, and it comes from Holmes' teacher, Thomas Troward. Judge Troward had this idea that I think really encapsulates the place you can go with finding the biggest God. Listen to these words from Thomas Troward. Because the originating life principle, God, is infinite, it is a single unit, and consequently, wherever it is at all, the whole must be present. But because it is infinite or limitless, it is everywhere, and therefore it follows that the whole of spirit must be present at every point in space at the same moment. So it's not that God is everywhere, it's that all of God is absolute, infinitely present at every point. Oh. That means the point of God that is you is the same God that created the entire universe. There's no difference. Ooh. Now how responsible are you for your life? In a good way. In a good way. Because everything that's going on in your life and in my life, we created. And we're in a dance with one another. God knows, Reverend Cliff and I have been in a dance for a long time. Over 20 years. It's wonderful. And we learn from each other. And we awaken with each other. And you're awakening as well. The fact that you would come to a place like this on a Sunday morning, or take a class with Reverend Tricia, or do anything of that sort means you want to know. You wouldn't bother if you didn't. You want to know something. This is what you want to know. You want to know that you are that presence and power, that you can do anything that you choose to do without exception. The only limitation you have in your life is your limited thought. And if you can set that down and recognize the presence that created the universe dwells at the point of view in its entirety, you can change anything. Any disease, any financial situation, any relational situation, any career situation. You're not victim to any of that, except in your mind. And when you stop and remember the truth of who you are, and I do the same, everything shifts. Everything gets more powerful. So the question today is, how big is your God? If your God is big enough, then you should never be afraid. You should never feel held back. You should grow wings and fly. Yeah. So that's what I want you to know today. So stay with that idea. Be a panentheist. And even if you don't want to pronounce or say that word, doesn't matter. The truth is that you know, because I've told you, and now there's no excuse. You were living in a state of grace, and that's over, because now you know the truth. That you can never blame anyone for anything that's happening in your life. It's you. Don't blame yourself either, because that's like blaming God. What's that going to get you? Know the truth. Live in the truth. Practice this truth every moment of your life. When you fall into judgment, all you do is starving yourself of the truth. Because whatever you're judging is God. Therefore, you are judging God. And how does that help? So set that down and pick up this glorious idea that life is brilliant and wonderful, and that you are right in the middle of it as the glory of the divine. And when you live your life that way, you will touch so many lives, and your life will increasingly get better and better as you are lifted up into that greater awareness of the truth that God is all there is, and that is who and what you are. Thank you. I love you. Yeah. Thank you.
That's good.
Yeah, good.
When you fall into judgment, you starve yourself of the truth. I love that. You'll be hearing that again, folks. Take out what you're going to give. Hold it in your hand. Unfold it. Because this is God too. This is power. This is presence. This is how you get the law of circulation and motion. Do not crinkle it up. Do not make it small. Make it large because you are large. This is God. This is the way we get the law of circulation going. The more you give, the more you receive. Let's say our abundance affirmation together. God is the source of all supply. Money is God in action. What we give, we receive multiplied abundantly. All that God is, I am. And so it is.
You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of